The cramping started at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks after the FBI agent shattered their world with 5 words. The body isn't his. Davina woke to a dull ache low in her belly, the kind that made her freeze in the darkness, one hand instinctively moving to the small bump that had just started to show. 4.5 months pregnant. The baby they'd announced at their wedding with joy and hope that maybe, finally, they could have something normal. The baby conceived in love after everything they'd survived, in peace instead of violence, in healing instead of trauma. She lay still in the pre-dawn darkness, willing the cramping to stop, telling herself it was nothing, just her body adjusting, just stress manifesting physically the way it had so many times before. But then the wetness came, warm between her legs, and she knew with the certainty of someone who'd been through too much already. This baby wasn't going to make it. Junwoo drove through Seoul's empty streets like a man possessed, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping hers so tightly it hurt. She didn't tell him to slow down, didn't tell him it was probably already too late. Just watched the streetlights blur past and felt something inside her go very quiet and very cold. The emergency room was bright and sterile and full of efficiency that felt cruel in its clinical detachment. A doctor, young and tired-looking with kind eyes that had delivered too much bad news, did an ultrasound with practiced hands that had done this too many times. No heartbeat. The words fell into the room like stones into dark water. Measuring small for gestational age. Signs of complete miscarriage in progress. I'm very sorry. We'll need to do a procedure to ensure everything passes safely. The baby was gone. The 4th child, the one that represented peace and healing and a future built on love instead of violence, was gone before it ever had a chance to become real. They gave her medication to help her body complete what it had started. Sent her home with pamphlets about grief and loss and trying again when she was ready. As if ready was a thing that existed in their world. As if she could try again while the man who'd broken her body with years of accumulated trauma was still out there somewhere planning his next move. As if another pregnancy was even thinkable when she could barely protect the children she already had. Junwoo tried to hold her that night, tried to offer comfort with touch and words and presence, but she pulled away, not because she didn't want him, not because she blamed him, but because the grief was transforming into something else, something sharp and focused and cold as winter steel. She'd cried enough over the years, cried when he hurt her, cried when the twins came early, cried when hope fought for life in the NICU, cried through therapy sessions processing the man she'd killed. She was done crying. What she felt now was rage. Pure, distilled, absolute rage that burned clean. And cold and focused. By morning, she'd made a decision. When Junwoo found her in the nursery watching the twins sleep, 2.5-year-old toddlers who'd survived everything thrown at them, she didn't turn around. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, emotionless, frightening in its calm. I'm not hiding anymore. When he comes for our children, I'll be ready. And I won't be slowed down by pregnancy or fear or mercy. He took this baby from me. The stress, the terror, the constant threat, it killed this baby as surely as if he'd pulled a trigger. He's taken enough. Junwoo started to say something about protection, about keeping her safe, about how they'd figure it out together. But she finally turned to look at him and he stopped mid-sentence. The woman looking back at him wasn't the broken nurse he'd found 9 months pregnant and terrified. Wasn't even the exhausted new mother who'd fought through postpartum depression and trauma. This was someone new, someone forged in fire and loss and the decision to stop being a victim. Someone dangerous. Good, he said finally, seeing what she'd become and recognizing it as necessary. Then we end this together. 1 week later, Davina's mother disappeared. Margaret Lawrence, who'd flown in from the States after the twins were born, who'd moved to Seoul permanently to be near her grandchildren, who'd forgiven Davina for all the secrets and lies once she understood what survival had required. She went to the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon, called to confirm what brand of diapers to buy, and never came home. Davina knew before the police called. Knew the way you know when lightning is about to strike. That electric certainty in the air that something terrible is coming. She was feeding Hope lunch. 1-year-old hands grabbing for the spoon when her phone buzzed with a video message from an unknown number. She watched it alone in the kitchen, one hand covering her mouth to keep from making sounds that would scare the children playing in the next room. Her mother sat in a chair in what looked like a basement, concrete walls and dim lighting, hands zip-tied behind her back, mouth covered with silver tape. And standing behind her, one hand resting almost casually on her shoulder, like they were posing for a family photo, was a man Davina had never seen but recognized instantly from Junwoo's descriptions and her own nightmares. Older than the body double she'd killed in that mountain estate, 70 at least, but tall and straight-backed with the kind of presence that filled a room even through a phone screen. Sharp features made sharper by age and illness. Cold eyes that held no warmth, no mercy, no humanity at all. This was Seo Kang-dae, the real one, the original monster. His voice when he spoke was cultured, almost gentle, which made it worse somehow. The contrast between their refined tone and the absolute cruelty of the words. You have 48 hours to bring me my grandson. The boy, Jiho. Come, alone to the address I'll send. Any police, any tricks, any deviation from my instructions, and your mother dies slowly. Very slowly. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is an instruction. Comply or suffer consequences you cannot imagine. The video ended with him smiling directly at the camera, and Davina felt her rage crystallize into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. Junwoo found her 10 minutes later, still standing in the kitchen, phone in hand, face completely blank in that way that meant she was processing something terrible. She showed him the video without a word, watched his face drain of color, then flush red, then settle into the same cold mask she wore. They couldn't call the police. Couldn't risk Margaret's life on the possibility that the authorities wouldn't bungle a rescue or that Kang-dae didn't have people inside the department feeding him information. Couldn't trust that calling for help wouldn't be the thing that got her mother killed. They were on their own, just like they had always been. Except they weren't entirely alone. Because that afternoon, a man neither of them had expected knocked on their door with an offer that changed everything. Victor looked thinner than Davina remembered, older, worn down by months of recovery and something else she couldn't quite identify. Guilt maybe, or fear, or both. He stood on their doorstep, with his hands visible and empty, non-threatening, and asked if they could talk. Junwoo almost slammed the door in his face. The man had taken a bullet for them, sure, saved Davina's life and probably the twins too. But that was months ago, and trust was a commodity they couldn't afford to spend freely. But something in Victor's expression made Davina pull the door open wider. The desperate look of a man who needed forgiveness or absolution or just to confess. "Come in," she said, "and tell us everything." What he told them over the next hour made a horrible kind of sense. During his recovery, while he was alone and vulnerable in the hospital with a bullet wound that had nearly killed him, Kang-dae's people had found him. Not to kill him for his failure to prevent the shooting, not to punish him for protecting Davina instead of standing aside, to recruit him. They'd shown him photos of his wife and children in the Philippines. Beautiful, candid shots that proved how easy it would be to get to them. Showed him how simple it would be for accidents to happen. A car that doesn't stop at a crosswalk. A gas leak in an apartment. Kidnapping that ends badly. He'd folded immediately, given them everything they wanted, because what choice did a man have when his family's lives were the price of refusal? Information about the modest house they'd moved to, the twins' daycare schedules, where Davina and Junwoo were most vulnerable, when they left the house and when they came back. He'd been feeding intelligence to Kang-dae for months, hating himself every single day, but unable to stop. because every day his family stayed alive was a day he'd bought with betrayal. But now, Victor said, voice shaking with something between fear and determination, now he wanted to help them for real. Because Kang Dae had made a mistake. He'd told Victor everything, thinking the man was completely controlled through terror and had no reason to rebel. Told him things he shouldn't have shared with a subordinate. Told him about the cancer. Kang Dae was dying. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer, metastasized to his liver and lungs, eating him alive from the inside out. Maybe 6 months left if he was lucky. Maybe 3 if he wasn't. That's why he'd used the body double before, preserving himself for these final moves, keeping his real self safe until the endgame. Why he was so desperate to secure a Jiho as his heir, to ensure his legacy before the disease claimed him. He was racing death, trying to guarantee that everything he'd built would continue through another generation. And dying men, Victor said quietly, are the most dangerous kind because they have absolutely nothing left to lose. He'd also told Victor where he was keeping Davina's mother, where he was hiding. And that information, Victor offered, hands spread on their kitchen table like he was laying down his cards, was theirs. If they wanted it. If they could forgive him enough to use it. In exchange, he asked only one thing. Help me save my family. Use your connections, your resources, get them out of the Philippines to somewhere Kang Dae's people can't reach them. Then I'll help you however you need. Feed him false information, be your eyes inside his operation, walk into that confrontation with you if that's what it takes. Even if it costs me my life, I owe you that much. I owe you everything. Junwoo wanted to refuse, wanted to throw Victor out and figure it out themselves without relying on someone who'd already betrayed them once. But Davina saw something he didn't. Saw an opportunity in the broken man sitting in their living room. Saw a chance to turn Kang Dae's own tactics against him, to use his confidence in his control of Victor as a weapon. She looked at Victor for a long moment, then nodded once. You work for us now, not him. You feed him information we want him to have. You become our eyes inside his operation, and when the time comes, you help us burn it all down. Can you do that? Victor met her eyes, and she saw the relief there, the desperate need for redemption. Yes, he said, whatever it takes. The address Victor gave them was a shock neither of them had anticipated. Junwoo's childhood home, the house where he'd grown up, where Kang Dae had molded him through violence and psychological torture, where his mother had lived before her supposed death 12 years ago. The house had been kept exactly as it was, preserved like a museum to trauma. And that's where Kang Dae was holding court and keeping hostages. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. He was forcing Junwoo to return to the place where the cycle began, to face everything that had been done to him in the rooms where it happened, to confront his father in the space where he'd learned to be afraid. It was psychological warfare of the cruelest kind, calculated to keep Junwoo off balance and emotional. But it also meant something else. It meant Kang Dae was sentimental in his own twisted way, attached to places and symbols and the past. Which meant he could be predicted. Which meant he could be beaten. They had 40 hours left when Victor delivered another piece of intelligence that stopped them all cold, that changed everything they thought they knew about the past 12 years. Kang Dae had more than Margaret. He had another hostage, one they'd never imagined because they'd thought she was dead. Junwoo's mother, Mrs. Seo, who'd supposedly died of a heart attack 12 years ago when Junwoo was 20, who'd left those letters that had given them hope and guidance in the mountain estate, who they'd mourned and honored and used as inspiration to be better than what they came from. She was alive. Kang Dae had faked her death, had held her prisoner for 12 years in conditions Victor could only guess at, had kept her alive as insurance and leverage and a way to maintain psychological control over his son even from a distance. The letters had been written under duress, forced confessions and apologies extracted through threat and manipulation. She was in that house now, somewhere in the basement or a locked room, another hostage in Kang Dae's game. And if they went in to rescue Margaret, they'd have a chance to save her too. Junwoo didn't speak for 5 full minutes after Victor told them, just stood frozen in their living room, face working through emotions faster than Davina could track, shocked that his mother was alive after 12 years of believing her dead. Rage that his father had done this, had taken even the comfort of believing she'd found peace in death. Hope that he might see her again, might tell her he was sorry for not being strong enough to protect her. Despair at what 12 years of captivity under Kang Dae's control might have done to her mind and spirit. Guilt that he'd moved on, built a life, found happiness while she suffered. All of it cycling through in waves that made Davina ache for him even through her own pain. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, scraped raw. Does he hurt her? Victor looked away, unable to meet his eyes. I don't know. I've never seen her. But given what I know about him, about how he operates, about what he's done to others, the answer is probably yes. Junwoo nodded once, sharp and final. Then we get them both out, mother and grandmother. No one gets left behind this time. The plan came together over 36 sleepless hours of preparation, fueled by coffee and rage, and the desperate need to end this before anyone else got hurt. Victor would continue his role as informant, telling Kang Dae they were coming, but accidentally leaving out crucial details about their actual strategy and backup plans. They'd need more than just the 3 of them. They'd need real help, professional help, help from someone with resources and authority. Which was when Davina made a call she'd been avoiding for weeks. To the man who'd appeared at their door 3 days after the FBI revelation, claiming to be someone she'd never thought she'd meet. Marcus Thompson, her father. The man who walked into their house looked nothing like what Davina had imagined fathers should look like, because she'd never had one to base expectations on. He was in his 50s, African American with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Tall and fit in the way of someone who'd spent a career staying ready for violence. He wore casual clothes, but carried himself with unmistakable authority. When Davina had first met him 3 weeks ago, she'd been skeptical. Another man claiming to be her father, after the fake one in episode 3, had tried to kidnap the twins for Kang Dae. But Marcus had come with proof. DNA tests, birth certificates, photos of her mother from 30 years ago, young and beautiful and happy with a man who had to be him. A marriage certificate from before Davina was born. And stories, intimate details about her mother that only someone who'd truly known her could tell. He was CIA, had been deep undercover in international crime syndicates for 25 years, so deep that he disappeared from his own life before he knew his girlfriend was pregnant. By the time he surfaced 2 years later, her mother had moved away, changed her name, started over. He'd spent decades searching in the gaps between assignments, tracking her through databases and old records, always one step behind. He'd found out about Davina only 6 months ago through the investigation into Junwoo's legal proceedings and the dismantling of the CO empire. Found his daughter, fully grown, with children of her own, married to the heir of one of the crime families he'd spent his career fighting. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Now he sat at their kitchen table, listening to their plan, and offered something they desperately needed: resources, a tactical team that wasn't on any official books, backup that wouldn't ask questions or file reports or follow procedure that might get people killed. Victor would use his position to map the house, identify where the hostages were likely held, determine guard positions and security measures. Marcus would coordinate with his team, positioning them around the perimeter, ready to breach on signal. And Davina and Junwoo would walk in the front door as expected, using themselves as bait to draw Kang Dae's attention, while the real rescue happened from other angles. It was dangerous. It was probably going to go wrong in ways they couldn't anticipate, but it was the only plan they had. And they were running out of time. But first, they had one more crisis to survive. One more piece of cruelty from a universe that seemed determined to break them. 3 days before the planned rescue, While Davina was giving the twins lunch and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, Ji-ho collapsed. One moment he was eating, carefully picking up pieces of cut fruit the way he always did, serious and focused. The next moment, he was on the floor seizing, eyes rolled back, small body convulsing in ways that made Davina's nurse training kick in even as her mother's heart tried to tear itself apart. She got him on his side, protected his head from hitting the floor, cleared the area around him, timed the seizure while screaming for Junwoo. 2 minutes. 3. 4. Too long. Way too long. Dangerous long. The ambulance came in 8 minutes. That felt like 8 hours. In the hospital, they did tests and scans and drew blood while Ji-ho lay small and still in a bed that dwarfed him, looking impossibly fragile. And when the doctor came back with results, Davina felt the universe tilt one more time. The genetic metabolic disorder. The same one that had sent them to Switzerland when the twins were newborns. The one they thought was treated and managed and under control. It was back. Worse than before, aggressive in ways the doctors hadn't anticipated and couldn't fully explain. And there was more. It wasn't random. It wasn't just bad luck or environmental factors. It was hereditary, passed down through the SEO bloodline, dormant in some generations, active and deadly in others. Junwoo didn't have it, had somehow escaped the genetic lottery, but his father did. Or had, before the cancer that was eating him alive, complicated the picture. The same genetic markers that made Ji-ho vulnerable to this disorder were the ones slowly killing Kang-dae, contributing to how aggressively the cancer was spreading. Grandfather and grandson bound by DNA and disease. 2 ends of a bloodline cursed by its own genetic legacy. Ji-ho needed treatment immediately. Specialized, expensive, experimental treatment available only at one facility in all of Asia. A facility in Singapore that specialized in rare metabolic disorders. A facility that Kang-dae, through years of strategic investments and careful positioning, had significant financial ties to and could control access to with a single phone call. The message came that evening, delivered by Victor, who looked shaken and pale. Kang-dae knew about Ji-ho's collapse, knew about the diagnosis, probably had people in the hospital feeding him information, knew they needed treatment he could provide or deny. His offer was simple and terrible. Bring the boy to him. He'd save Ji-ho's life while training him as heir, ensuring he got the medical care he needed while molding him into the next generation of CO leadership. Or refuse and watch the child die the same slow death claiming his grandfather. Watch him suffer and decline and eventually stop breathing because they'd put pride above his survival. Medicine or legacy. Life or loyalty. Choose. Davina read the message 3 times, each word carving itself into her consciousness. Each sentence another layer of cruelty from a man who turned manipulation into an art form. Then she looked at Junwoo across their kitchen table and said what they were both thinking. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We take what's ours and we burn him down. We get the medical authorization through other channels. We get Ji-ho the treatment he needs, and we end Kang-dae before he can block us. Marcus can help. The CIA has connections. We move fast and we move now. The final 12 hours before the rescue were a blur of preparation and fear and determination. Marcus pulled strings, called in favors, got Ji-ho emergency authorization for the Singapore facility through channels that bypassed Kang-dae's influence. The treatment would start as soon as this was over, as soon as they could safely transport him. Victor fed Kang-dae information that they were coming, that they were bringing Ji-ho as demanded, that they were defeated and desperate and willing to comply. Every word a lie, every detail crafted to make Kang-dae confident and off guard. And Davina stood in her daughter's nursery, watching Hope sleep, 1 year old and innocent and unaware of the danger swirling around them all, and made herself a promise. Whatever happened in that house, whatever she had to do, her children would be safe. All of them, no matter the cost. The day of the rescue came with steel gray clouds and the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there. Davina dressed carefully that morning, choosing practical clothes that wouldn't restrict movement. Dark jeans, sturdy boots, a black jacket that hid the body armor Marcus had insisted she wear. She wasn't pregnant, wasn't weak, wasn't slowed by anything except the rage that had been building since the miscarriage, and the love that made her capable of anything to protect her children. She braided her box braids back tight, checked the small knife Marcus had given her that was strapped to her ankle, looked at herself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman looking back. She'd come so far from the terrified nurse who tried to disappear 9 months pregnant. She kissed the twins goodbye, held hope a little longer than usual, promised them she'd be home for dinner. The babysitter, an older woman from the neighborhood who knew nothing about their real situation, arrived at noon. And then Davina, Junwoo, Marcus, and Victor piled into an unmarked van and drove toward the past. The house looked exactly as Junwoo remembered, and nothing like it at the same time. Same structure, same traditional Korean architecture, with the curved roof and wooden beams. Same garden that had once been beautiful, but was now overgrown and gone to seed. But knowing what it represented now, knowing what had happened within those walls and what was happening there, still made it look different, darker, more oppressive. Like the house itself had absorbed the violence and pain and stored it in the wood and stone and terrible memories. They parked 2 blocks away. Marcus coordinated with his team through encrypted comms, positioning snipers on rooftops and tactical units at every exit. Victor made one final call to Kangdae, confirming they were coming, selling the lie that they were desperate and defeated, and bringing Jiho as demanded. And then Davina and Junwoo walked toward that house hand in hand, knowing this was the end one way or another. The door opened before they knocked. A guard, young and cold-eyed with the look of someone who'd done terrible things and would do more without hesitation, gestured them inside with the barrel of his gun. Professional, efficient, terrifying in his casual competence. They walked into the foyer and Davina felt Junwoo's hand tighten convulsively around hers. This was where he'd taken his first steps, where he'd hidden from his father's rages in a closet that probably still existed somewhere, where his childhood had been systematically destroyed through violence and fear and the slow crushing of everything soft and good. The house should have felt empty, abandoned, dead. Instead, it felt occupied by ghosts and current horrors both. They were led deeper inside, through rooms that Junwoo's eyes tracked with the expression of a man being led through his own nightmares made physical. The living room where he'd been beaten for getting a B instead of an A. The dining room where dinner had been a minefield of potential punishments. The hallway where he'd pressed himself against walls trying to be invisible. And then they were in what had been the formal sitting room, and there he was. Seo Kangdae looked like death already claimed part of him and was just waiting to collect the rest. Gaunt where the body double had been solid, all sharp angles and protruding bones. Skin with the waxy yellow quality of liver failure, jaundiced and wrong. But he stood straight, held himself like a king receiving subjects in his throne room, and the gun in his hand was absolutely steady, despite the visible tremor in his other hand. Behind him, Davina saw her mother tied to a chair, mouth gagged with duct tape, eyes wide with fear and rage both, still alive, still fighting. And in another chair beside her, a woman Davina had never seen, but Junwoo clearly recognized from the way all the blood drained from his face. Older than she should be, thin to the point of frailty, gray hair that had probably once been black, with the look of someone who'd been broken and poorly reassembled multiple times over many years. His mother, alive but so diminished by captivity that she barely seemed present, eyes distant like part of her was somewhere else entirely. And arranged around the room, 3 more armed guards standing at strategic positions, and something that made Davina's breath catch in, recognition and shock. Minji, the ex-fiancé from episode 2, who'd shown up with a fake pregnancy and blackmail, who disappeared to Europe after the standoff with the flash drives. Visibly pregnant now, 7 months along easily, belly huge and obvious under an expensive dress. Standing beside Kangdae with a proprietary hand on his arm that made Davina's stomach turn. "Welcome to my home," Kangdae said, and his voice was exactly like the recording. Cultured, almost warm, completely devoid of real feeling. "My son, my daughter-in-law, how good of you to accept my invitation." His eyes tracked the room, noting the absence of the third person he demanded. "I don't see my grandson. Surely you didn't think I wouldn't notice. Surely you didn't think I'm that foolish." Junwoo stepped forward slightly, putting himself between Davina and his father in an unconscious protective gesture. "He's safe, and he's staying safe. Whatever you think you're going to accomplish here ends now. You let these women go, and maybe we can talk about what happens next." Kangdae laughed, a sound like broken glass scraping across concrete. "Talk? You think I brought you here to talk? No, son. I brought you here to teach you one final lesson. The one I should have taught you years ago. You don't get to choose. You don't get to walk away. You don't get to pretend you're better than what I made you. You're mine. You've always been mine. The CO blood runs in your veins and you can't escape it. And if I can't have you, if you won't be what I created you to be, I'll take what matters most to you, piece by piece, until there's nothing left." He gestured to Minji, and she stepped forward with a smile that made Davina's skin crawl. "Tell them," Kangdae instructed. "Tell them what you told me." Minji's hand went to her swollen belly, caressing it with obvious pride, and Davina suddenly understood with sickening clarity. "This isn't Junwoo's baby," Minji said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "It never was. Even the fake pregnancy in that ultrasound was just theater. But this one is real. And it's his." She nodded toward Kangdae with something that looked disturbingly like genuine affection. "I've been his for years. Since before the fake engagement, since before I was sent to get close to you. Everything was a setup. Getting close to you, the pregnancy lie, the blackmail, all of it, because he needed to know what you'd do under pressure, how far you could be pushed, whether you were still his son or if that woman had truly changed you beyond recognition. And now I'm carrying his real heir, his fresh start, a baby he can raise right from the beginning without your mother's softness corrupting the bloodline. Congratulations, Junwoo. You're going to have a baby brother, half-brother, same CO blood, same legacy." The disgust on Junwoo's face was visceral, immediate, complete. "You're dying," he said to his father, voice flat. "Victor told us. Cancer eating you alive. 6 months if. You're lucky. You really think you can train an infant in 6 months?" Kangdae's smile widened, showing too many teeth. 6 months, 6 years, what does it matter? I've made arrangements. Others will continue what I start. Minji knows the plan. Others in the organization know their roles. This child will be raised by people who understand power, who understand legacy, who won't make the mistakes your mother made in trying to make you soft and weak. And if you cooperate, if you give me Jiho to begin his education in the time I have left, I'll let your mothers live. Both of them. You choose right now. Your son's future or their lives. 48 hours I gave you. Time's up. Decide. If you're feeling this intensity and need to know what happens next, hit that like button and subscribe to Afro-Korean World right now, because this confrontation is about to explode. The sound that came from Junwoo wasn't quite a laugh, more like a release of pressure that had been building for 32 years. "You think I came here to negotiate, that I'd hand over my child because you threatened my mother's. You still don't understand even now. I'm not 12 years old anymore. I'm not the boy you beat into submission when he couldn't solve math problems fast enough. I'm not the teenager you broke with psychological torture. I'm not the man you made me into either. I'm something new, something you didn't plan for and can't control. something your violence created but can't contain. He looked at his mother, tied to that chair, at the broken woman who'd been prisoner for 12 years, who'd suffered in ways he could only imagine. "Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't save you before. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough or smart enough to realize the death was fake. But I'm saving you now." He looked at Margaret, Davina's mother, who'd loved his wife and children despite everything. "And you, who gave me a family when I didn't deserve one. I'm saving you too." And then he did something that made every guard in the room tense. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket, a weapon Marcus had provided and trained him to use. Pointed it steadily at his father with hands that didn't shake at all. "This ends now, one way or another. The cycle breaks today." Everything happened very fast after that. Chaos erupting from multiple directions simultaneously in the way of plans that are barely controlled violence. Kang-dae moved toward a carrier that was supposed to hold Ji-ho but was empty, his face twisting with rage as he realized the deception. Began to turn his gun toward the hostages in retaliation. Victor, who'd been hidden in the hallway waiting for his moment, burst through the door and took out 2 guards before they could fully react. The sound of gunfire sudden and deafening in the enclosed space. Marcus and his tactical team breached through windows and the back door simultaneously, with flashbangs and smoke, tactical precision overwhelming Kang-dae's defenses through sheer coordinated force. Minji screamed and stumbled backward, going down hard, her pregnant belly hitting the floor, and something in Davina couldn't let even an enemy suffer that way. She ran to the pregnant woman who tried to destroy them, years of nursing training overriding everything else. Checked for injuries with competent hands. Felt Minji's belly contracting under her palms, hard and rhythmic. "You're in labor," Davina said over the chaos. "Early labor from the stress and the fall. We need to get you to a hospital." Minji grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, face twisted with pain and something that looked like genuine fear. "Don't let him have my baby," she gasped between contractions. "Please. I don't love him. I never did. He controlled me the same way he controlled everyone, through fear and manipulation and making you believe you had no choice. Don't let him turn my son into a monster. Promise me." The room was pure chaos now. Victor had 1 guard in a chokehold, both of them crashing into furniture. Marcus's team was securing the others with zip ties and professional efficiency. Junwoo's gun was still trained on Kang-dae, who'd somehow kept his own weapon through the tumult, both men frozen in a standoff that had been building for 32 years. And in the middle of it all, Mrs. Seo, Junwoo's mother, who'd been captive for 12 years, stood up from her chair. The zip ties had been cut by someone from Marcus's team who'd reached her first. She stood, swaying slightly like someone who hadn't used her legs properly in too long, and walked toward Kang-dae with the slow inevitability of a ghost demanding justice. He turned toward her, gun swinging, and she didn't even flinch, just kept walking. Kept moving toward the man who'd destroyed her life and stolen 12 years she'd never get back. "You kept me alive," she said, and her voice was stronger than her body looked, rusty from disuse, but clear. "Alive to torture. Alive to control our son from a distance through guilt and grief. Alive because you're so arrogant, you thought I'd never fight back, that you'd broken me so completely I wasn't a threat. But you were wrong." She'd picked up a kitchen knife from somewhere. Davina didn't see where or when, but it was in her hand now. Held it like she knew exactly how to use it, like she'd been planning this for years. "I should have done this 30 years ago. Before you destroyed Junwoo's childhood, before you built an empire on suffering and blood money, before more children were born into this curse, before everything good was corrupted by your touch." She moved faster than anyone expected, faster than a woman who'd been captive for 12 years should be able to move. Kang-dae fired, but the shot went wide, his dying body betraying him at the crucial moment. And then she was on him, knife rising and falling, years of rage and pain and captivity fueling every strike. Junwoo lunged forward, trying to stop her, trying to save his mother from becoming what his father had made them all into. But Marcus grabbed him, held him back with strong arms and quiet words. "Let her finish it," Marcus said. "Let her end what she should have ended decades ago. This is hers to do, not yours, not Davina's, hers." Kangdae fell to the floor of the house where he'd raised his son through violence and psychological torture, blood spreading beneath him in a pool that looked black in the dim light. He looked up at his wife, his son, the family he'd broken and shaped and tried to own completely, and even bleeding out, even dying with his grand plans collapsing around him, he laughed. That terrible laugh that had haunted Junwoo's nightmares for decades. "You think this ends it," he said, voice weakening, but still carrying that cultured tone. "You're fools, all of you, the council. They'll come for the children, for the bloodline. You've only fought one monster today. There's a dozen more, and they're bigger than me. They don't forgive. They don't forget. They own you now, more than I ever did." His eyes found Junwoo one last time. "You wanted to escape. You never will. Neither will your children, or theirs. The CO blood is marked forever. Welcome to the real game, son." He died still smiling, and the silence after was deafening. Mrs. CO dropped the knife like it burned her hand, looked at her palms covered in her husband's blood, dark and sticky, and proof of what she'd done. Then looked at her son with eyes that were clearer than they'd been in years. "I'll go to prison," she said calmly, like she'd made her peace with this outcome long ago. "I'll plead guilty. I'll take whatever sentence they give me. But you're free now. You and your family. The cycle is broken. Your children don't have to grow up afraid. Raise them better than I raised you. Be the father I couldn't teach you to be." She turned to Davina, really seeing her for the first time. "Thank you for saving my son. For showing him that love could be stronger than hate, that broken people could heal, that there was another way to live. Take care of him. Take care of all of them." And then she walked to Marcus and held out her hands for handcuffs like she'd been expecting this moment. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's go." But they weren't done yet because Minji was screaming now, contractions coming fast and hard, labor progressing with alarming speed. Davina found herself delivering a baby on the floor of Kangdae's house while police sirens wailed in the distance and Marcus coordinated cleanup. Found herself coaching Minji through pushing, through breathing, through bringing new life into the world in the same room where so much death had just occurred. The irony wasn't lost on her. The baby came fast, a boy, premature at 32 weeks, but breathing and crying and alive. Davina cut the cord with hands that were surprisingly steady, wrapped him in her jacket, did the initial checks with professional competence. He was small, but seemed healthy, would need NICU monitoring, but had good color and strong lungs. Minji reached for him with shaking hands, held him for just a moment, then pushed him toward Davina. "Take him," she said. "Please." "I can't. I won't. He deserves better than me, better than his father, better than this whole cursed bloodline. You take him. Raise him right. Show him there's another way." And then she passed out, blood loss and exhaustion and trauma finally claiming consciousness. The aftermath blurred together in Davina's memory later, like scenes from a movie she'd watched rather than lived. Paramedics arriving, taking Minji to the hospital where she'd recover physically, if not mentally. Police securing the scene, taking statements, photographing evidence. Margaret freed and sobbing in Davina's arms, shaking with relief and residual terror. Mrs. Seo arrested but peaceful, accepting her fate with grace and something that looked like relief. Victor surviving but with injuries that would take months to heal, being loaded into an ambulance while apologizing over and over. Marcus coordinating everything, making statements, ensuring the story was controlled and told the right way. And through it all, Junwoo standing in his childhood home, looking at the body of his father, covered by a sheet, and trying to process what freedom actually meant after a lifetime of chains. They didn't go home that night. Marcus insisted on a safe house until they could be sure there were no immediate retaliation attempts from Kang Dae's organization or this mysterious council he'd mentioned with his dying breath. So they stayed in a nondescript apartment in a nondescript building with guards at every entrance and exit. Their children were brought to them by trusted agents, the twins confused about why they couldn't go home, Hope crying for her familiar room. But Davina held all three of them close in a strange bed in a strange place and tried to explain that sometimes we have to stay somewhere new for a little while to stay safe. And eventually, they slept, piled together in exhausted innocence, while their parents sat in the next room and tried to figure out what came next. 3 days later, they made a decision that surprised everyone who knew them. Minji, recovering from an emergency C-section and postpartum complications in a hospital under guard, called them. Said she was placing the baby in foster care because she couldn't look at him without seeing Kang Dae, without remembering everything she'd done and been part of. Said she was leaving Korea, disappearing somewhere Kang Dae's people, and this council would never find her, starting over with a new identity. Said she was sorry for everything, even though sorry would never be enough to make up for the damage. And after she hung up, Davina looked at Junwoo and said something that probably sounded crazy. We should take him. The baby. Your half-brother. Kang Dae's son. He's innocent in all this. He didn't choose his father or the circumstances of his birth. And if we don't, take him. If he goes into the system, Kang Dae's people will find him eventually. They'll use him the way they used you. Raise him to continue the legacy. But if he's with us, part of our family, we can keep him safe. We can show him another way. We can prove that blood doesn't have to be destiny. Junwoo stared at her like she'd grown a second head, like she was suggesting something impossible. Looked at the 3 children already sleeping in the next room, thought about the responsibility and danger and complexity. Then slowly, impossibly, he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. We take him. We raise them all together. And we break every cycle that ever tried to destroy us. We show that family is choice, not just blood. That love is stronger than genetics. That we can be better than what we came from. The baby came home 2 weeks later when he was stable enough to leave the NICU. They named him Jin-ho, which meant goodness and truth. 2 things they hoped he'd embody despite his biological father. 4 children, now under 5 years old. The twins who were getting stronger every day with the medical treatment they'd secured through Marcus's CIA connections, flying to Singapore twice a month for therapy. Hope, who was walking everywhere and babbling and lighting up every room she entered. And Jin-ho, who had his father's features, but would hopefully never have his father's heart. It was chaos and exhaustion and beautiful in ways Davina had never imagined. Normal family chaos. The kind that came from too many diapers and not enough sleep and love that was messy and real and earned through surviving hell together. The kind where you collapsed on the couch at the end of the day, wondering how you'd make it through tomorrow, but knowing you would because there was no other choice. Mrs. Seo went to trial 4 months later. Pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Had lawyers argue years of abuse and captivity and fear for her family as mitigating circumstances. Got 15 years with possibility of parole in 8. She'd be 73 at minimum when released, but she accepted the sentence without complaint. Told Junwoo during his visits that prison felt freer than the captivity she'd endured under Kang Dae, that having a release date was more than she'd had in 12 years. That knowing her family was safe outside these walls was worth any price. That she had time to read now, to think, to heal in ways she'd never been able to before, when every moment was survival. He visited her every week without fail, brought photos of the children, told her about their lives in careful detail. And slowly, painfully, both of them healed. Victor recovered and relocated his family to New Zealand with new identities and a fresh start funded by money Marcus had secured through asset seizures from Kang Dae's organization. called Davina once after they settled, voice shaking with gratitude, to thank her for giving him a chance at redemption when he deserved nothing. She told him to live well and be happy and never contact them again for everyone's safety. He agreed, and that was the last they heard from him. One more ghost from their past laid to rest. Marcus stayed in Seoul, took a position at the embassy that was probably a cover for continued intelligence work, became a permanent presence in their lives. The grandfather the children had never had and desperately needed. He taught Junwoo to fish on weekends, taught Davina to shoot at ranges outside the city, told them stories about international crime that made them grateful for their boring, modest life, and warned them regularly that the council Kang Dae had mentioned was still out there, still watching, still waiting. But months passed and nothing happened. Maybe Kang Dae had been lying about his importance to make himself seem more powerful in death than he'd been in life. Or maybe the council had bigger concerns than one family that just wanted to be left alone. Either way, they lived carefully, but they lived. 5 years went by in a blur of school plays and scraped knees and bedtime stories and ordinary miracles. The twins turned 7, started 2nd grade, thrived in ways that seemed impossible given their traumatic start. Jiho grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books more than people, who'd inherited his father's intelligence without his cruelty, who spent hours reading in corners and asked questions that made adults uncomfortable in their depth. Minseo became exactly as fierce as her name suggested, protective of her siblings and afraid of absolutely nothing. The first to confront bullies and the last to back down. Hope turned 6, was sunshine personified, making friends everywhere she went and somehow seeing the good in everyone despite everything she'd been born into. And Jin-ho, Kang Dae's biological son, grew into a gentle child who cried when he saw hurt animals and shared every toy he owned and showed no signs whatsoever of his father's cruelty. Proof that nurture could triumph over nature, that love could reshape what genetics tried to determine. Junwoo worked as a counselor at a center for domestic violence survivors, using his own history and trauma to help others escape cycles of abuse. Turned his pain into purpose, his past into something that could help people. Davina went back to nursing part-time, splitting hours between a community clinic and the children's schools where she volunteered. They lived carefully, vigilantly, always aware that threats could emerge. But they lived, truly lived. Had family dinners and movie nights and arguments about homework and bedtimes. Normal problems, normal joys, normal life that felt miraculous every single day because they knew how close they'd come to losing it. And on their 7th wedding anniversary, standing in the same park where he'd proposed, Junwoo looked at Davina and said something that made her laugh and cry at once. I think we made it. I think we actually survived everything and came out the other side whole, better than I ever thought possible. She kissed him under the cherry blossoms, feeling the spring breeze and the weight of everything they'd overcome, and let herself believe it might actually be true. The night it all changed started like any other night, mundane and ordinary in the way that makes what comes after even more shocking. Dinner with 4 children around their dining room table, the usual chaos of everyone talking at once and someone always spilling something. Jiho explaining his science project with intense focus. Minseo arguing about why she should be allowed to take taekwondo lessons. Hope singing a song she'd learned at school, slightly off-key. Jin-ho quietly eating and watching his siblings with the contentment of a child who'd found his place. Bath time with the younger 2. Homework supervision with the older ones. Stories. Goodnight kisses. Davina was cleaning the kitchen, hands in soapy water, mind wandering through the pleasant emptiness of routine tasks when the doorbell rang. 7:45 on a Thursday evening. Too late for neighbors dropping by. No deliveries expected. She dried her hands slowly, felt something cold settle in her stomach. Called for Junwoo, who came from the living room where he'd been reviewing the twins' homework. They looked at each other, And that silent communication of people who'd survived too much together and moved toward the door in unison. The man standing there was a stranger, completely average in every way that mattered. Average height, average build, average features that wouldn't stand out in any crowd or be memorable in any lineup. Brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a business suit that could have come from any department store. But his eyes were cold and calculating and familiar in a way that made Davina's blood freeze despite the warm evening air. She'd seen eyes like that before, on Kangdae, on men who saw people as tools and life as a game. "Can I help you?" she asked, one hand already reaching for the phone in her pocket, preparing to call Marcus, or the police, or anyone who could help. He smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who knew his prey was already caught. "Mrs. Seo, or should I say Mrs. Lawrence? Or perhaps you prefer simply Davina. You have many names, many identities across many documents, but only one that matters to us." He pulled out a tablet with smooth, practiced motion, showed her a screen filled with photos that made her heart stop completely. Her children, all 4 of them, taken over years in dozens of locations and situations. At school, at the park, in their own backyard through the window, playing at Marcus's apartment, walking home from the store with her. A comprehensive surveillance record that proved beyond any doubt that they'd never been safe at all, that the peace they'd felt was an illusion, that someone had been watching every single day for 5 years. "We've been watching," he confirmed, reading her horror accurately, waiting, being patient, seeing if you were worth the investment, whether the bloodline would breed true despite your interference. And the council has decided. You've proven yourselves resourceful, resilient, survivors against impossible odds, exactly the kind of bloodline we need for the next generation of operations. So here's what happens next. Junwoo appeared behind Davina, assessing the threat immediately with instincts honed by decades of danger. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "I'm no one, just a messenger. But I represent everyone." The council Kangdae answered to before he grew too ambitious and too sloppy. The organization that's existed for 300 years, while individual families and empires rise and fall and are forgotten. We've been evaluating you since Kangdae's death, watching how you handled yourselves, how you raised the children, how you adapted, and we've decided to offer you a choice. A very simple choice, really. Join us willingly. Use your unique skills and experiences in our service. Raise your children to understand their place in our structure and their role in our future. In exchange, you'll have protection, resources, power beyond what Kangdae ever wielded. You'll be valued members instead of targets. Or refuse. And watch as we systematically dismantle everything you've built. Your children will be taken and raised properly by those who understand their potential. You'll be eliminated as examples to others who might think they can leave this life. The choice is yours. You have 72 hours to decide. He turned to leave, paused at the bottom of their steps, looked back with that cold smile. "Oh, and we know about the medical treatments, about the CIA protection, about the accounts Marcus thinks are hidden. We know everything. We've always known everything. We allowed you this time to see what you'd become. And now, the evaluation period is over. 72 hours. Choose wisely." He walked away down their suburban street like he was just a neighbor out for an evening stroll, got into a car parked 3 houses down, and drove away at exactly the speed limit. Davina and Junwoo stood frozen in their doorway until his taillights disappeared around the corner, until the normal evening sounds of the neighborhood reasserted themselves. And then Junwoo pulled her inside and locked the door with hands that shook despite 5 years of peace, despite all the therapy and healing and building of new life. Because they both knew with absolute certainty that everything they'd survived, everything they'd built, was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. The real war was just beginning. What was your favorite scene in this episode? The miscarriage that transformed Davina. The mother who'd been prisoner for 12 years getting her revenge. The choice to adopt an enemy's baby. Drop a comment and let me know. And if you're ready to see how this war against the council ends, if you need to know whether they survive or fall, comment episode 5 below right now. Subscribe to Afro-Korean World and hit that notification bell because the final battle is coming. The council thinks they've won. They think they have all the leverage. They have no idea who they're dealing with. 4 children to protect. A family forged in fire. And parents who've already proven they'll do anything, sacrifice anything, become anything to keep their children safe. Episode 5 drops soon, and nobody is ready for how this story ends.